I'm Ron Husbands. I'm a councilman from the village of Kalkaska. I understand what you and the governor must be going through. It's got to be tremendously hard to make the cuts that you do of what's planned. The only thing that I'm concerned about is our smaller communities that we have, like revenue sharing, things like that are being cut. I understand when you have smaller communities next to each other, part of the plan is to merge them together, to utilize each other's services. But what about the small towns that don't have anybody next to them? The cuts of the revenue sharing doesn't also take in consideration of the police. In anybody's budget in the cities or anything else, the biggest part of their budget is policing. It's just the way it is. So the first thing everyone does is they cut the police department down to the bare minimum. This is opening up a whole can of worms and the safety of everyone. We can't just take cuts and cuts and cuts. I understand the personal property tax. I've been against it from day one on businesses. But you have to have something to compensate for it, for the loss. We've already cut. The village of Kalkaska has cut and cut and cut. Our office has very few people in it any longer. Our police department is cut down to, I believe, 2 full-time officers and I believe 1 or 2 part-time. That's it. And that's for all, for all the hours. And it's not like the state police. They have to do all the paperwork, everything else, and combine with all of the calls that we do. My main concern is there's not any thought of the money that you're taking from us, of replacing in some other way of doing it. And it's like, when you start cutting, you have no other place to go. And I'm very concerned of what's going to happen. I know there was talk about the shared funding of part of it being on how much you can cut in the year. You make up a plan, and then that will be considered to have some sharing in the future. What about the communities who've already done that? That's not going to be taken into consideration. We've already cut as low as we can cut. And from what I understand from the part of the revenue sharing that you're planning on, the little bit that's going to be left, if you don't have a plan to cut more, you're not going to get anything anymore. And it just concerns me that the revenue sharing cut, plus of all the other cuts and the personal property tax cut, and nothing to replace it, is going to kill small communities.
It's just an excellent example of the type of concern that people feel all across the state with the trepidation of moving into and dealing with facing the new reality that our state has today. I come from a small community as well. I actually live just in a township. We don't have a police force in the township where I live. And so we rely on county sheriffs and state police to some extent. I also live on a dirt road, don't even have it paved. And so there is no Danby Township Police Service. There is, when you think about it, just the amount of policing that's available at any place across the whole state, there's different answers depending on where you're at, depending on what your population is, makes a difference as well. And so the types of things you're talking about are things that I live every day personally, just by virtue of the place where I've decided to raise my family. Now, I want to make clear, though, that the way that you would describe the incentive part of the revenue sharing proposal is not at all true. We are not rewarding anybody for making cuts. There is no part that says if you cut this amount, you get revenue sharing. It's the idea of sharing services. Now, if you're a village that is a part of a township and a part of a county, which you are, that's by definition, that there are service sharing opportunities there too. And it's not just 2 cities or 2 villages that are near each other, but it's trying to find ways to share services between them. And the other thing I'd like to clear up as well, that we don't have any incentives or push toward merging of communities. Legal consolidation is not on our agenda. We care more, because legal consolidation, you could just, it's like putting two departments together at the state. A lot of times all they do is change the name of the department. It doesn't necessarily lead to save money. And so what we're looking for is service consolidation. That there are things that, for example, a police force that the county offers, and that a lot of places, like in the county where I live, the townships will, rather than have their own police department, will contract with the sheriff's department for a certain number of hours of patrol and things. And it's not necessarily the right answer where you're at, but it's an answer, something to look at. So if you look across this whole state, there's all kinds of examples of communities that are faced with the same hard economic realities that we face today. We just have less money. That's just all there is to it. And in the face of having less money, it means that the way that we operate is going to have to change. In some cases, it might mean that the service levels go down. In a lot of cases, though, it means that we root out the duplicative levels of services that exist. And when that happens, and we have the right incentives in place for that to happen statewide, then the effectiveness of that pie goes up, even though the size of it didn't in the short term. Our goal long term, though, is to fix the Michigan economy. You have a growing economy. That means that you're increasing revenues the right way, which is by just more activity, more people with more income or higher income and more jobs and more business sales and all these things happening in the state, and it makes these things more easily dealt with. And so I would encourage everybody to just to look at the situation as it stands today, and to the extent that you can, just embrace the change and say one way or another, you're going to find a way to make this work through partnerships that we never thought was possible in the past, through actually erasing the jurisdictional boundaries that have kept us apart for so long. And that's why it was a good group to talk to, because right now you're the northern Michigan, region that has gotten together on this, from here and Cadillac and so forth, and all the way over to Petoskey now, that you have common interests. And there was probably a time when you looked at Traverse City and Petoskey as being having rivaling interests, but they're not rivaling interests. You have the same interest. And so the idea of joining together and doing things as a region is something that economic developers across the state are starting to understand better than ever before. And it's the sort of thing that the business community's found out more than ever before, is that we have to start pulling whole areas in the same direction and erasing these territories that have stopped us from getting together in the past. Dispatch is another example. In the county where I live, Ione County, small rural county, smaller than this county, there used to be tons of dispatch centers for all the different police agencies all over the place. But now there's one, okay, and it's handled by the county's central dispatch. And when that argument was happening in the 90s, and they said, well, it's not going to work, they're not going to know what to do, people's lives will be endangered, all this drama over change, you know what happens? It works fantastic. It's a dispatch center that we're proud of. And they do right by our citizens, and it's efficient. And so when we look at these sorts of things, sharing service is hard. It's hard. Sometimes you've got to let go of a little bit of control in order to happen. But it's the right answer for our constituents, because we want to have the best service we can deliver with the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and speak to you.